Shalom, Israel, shalom, shalom. Yahweh Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shah, Barakatham. All right. Hey, coming back at you with another text lab, man. We in series number 2. All right. And this one right here is going into Mitzraim. So if you're not familiar with series number 1, go back to the YouTube channel. You can see it on the Patreon, obviously, but you can also see it on Yonatan SOT YouTube page. Go to that page, Akim, check this video out. Also, when you get a chance, like, share, and subscribe this video so the edification can get out. People can understand what the term Mitzrayim really means. Okay, let's go into it. These are the materials you need. KJV Bible, KJV Apocrypha, Strong's Concordance. All right, I'm going to go briefly into some commentaries, only to show you the historical understanding of the term Mitzrayim. And we'll also briefly touch on how the Bible itself deals with the term, okay? Now, let's start at Deuteronomy 28:68. And the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships, by the way whereof I spake unto thee. Thou shalt see it no more again. And there shall you be sold to your enemies for bondmen and bondwomen, and no man shall buy you. Now, we're going to prove in this video that the term Egypt does not have to mean physical Egypt. And we're going to prove that the term can be used conversely for bondage. And this is not just an Israelite perspective. Christians have taken this stance throughout the ages. All right. So proper biblical exegesis will lead you to believe that Egypt has been used multiple times synonymous with the word bondage. So once again, this is not something we just made up yesterday, all right, to make it fit our doctrine. Now, let's take a look at Hosea chapter 8 and verse 13. Now, let's pay attention to the context of the book of Hosea. And I always say this. The book of Hosea is mainly to the northern kingdom, but there are prophecies that pertain to both northern and southern kingdom in the book, all right? And that's for a whole nother breakdown, right? But let's just pay attention. So Hosea chapter 8 and verse 13, it says, they sacrifice flesh for the sacrifices of mine offerings and eat it, but the Lord accepteth them not. Now will he remember their iniquity and visit their sins. They shall return to Egypt. Now, once again, this is a verse speaking of the northern kingdom because of their sins and their iniquity being casted off into captivity. Now, what we're looking at on the left side is Deuteronomy 28:68, which is a prophecy in the curses section of the law, in the curses section of the covenant, speaking to Israelites in general. So all Israelites everywhere. You know, this is the capstone to the curses, verse 68, right? And then when we look at Hosea 8, we're speaking of the northern kingdom. Now let's pay attention to some things, right? Let's look at this word Egypt real quick. So let's pull it up in our interlinear, all right? Now, okay, let's pay attention. Deuteronomy chapter 28 and verse 68. This is the verse broken down in Hebrew. If you want to see a full exegesis on this, I suggest you go to Yonatan SOT and look at Deuteronomy 28. All right. I broke this verse down all the way to the bones. I parsed out the word. I broke it all the way down. We went into the context of the chapter, everything. So if you want a full biblical exegesis on this verse, you need to go to that page. All right. But right now, this is what we're going to deal with. So when it says Egypt here, it's the word Mitzrayim. All right. And we see it right here at the top. Okay. That's Mitzrayim. And it's H4714. Let's take a look at it. It says the son of Ham, also his descendant in their country in Northwest Africa. Right. And it says proper name of a territory and people, feminine, masculine, plural, so forth and so on. Right. So we see that if we look at the definition of the word is the word Egypt. Okay. That's Mitzrayim. Now let's see how the commentaries have this verse. Now, this is the Benson commentary of the Bible on the left-hand side, and on the right-hand side, we have the pulpit commentary. Let's pay attention to what these Christian commentators say. They shall return to Egypt. And the Benson commentary says, going into Egypt seems to have been a proverbial expression for extreme misery, and may here denote that they should go into a state of captivity and bondage as bad as that which their forefathers had suffered in Egypt. So Benson acknowledges and recognizes, right? The Israelites did not write this. Benson acknowledges and recognizes that Egypt in Hosea 8 and 13 is a figurative Egypt. Let's look at the pulpit commentary. About halfway down, it says, now will he remember their iniquity and visit their sins, they should return to Egypt. The turning point was now reached. Their iniquity was full, and the time of punishment had arrived. God had delivered their fathers out of the bondage of Egypt. Now he will send their posterity into a bondage similar to, or even worse than, that of Egypt. Now we know that this is the truth. We know that this is the truth, and we're about to show you, right? But let's keep looking. Look at the bottom here, okay? It says they shall return to Egypt, either flee thither for refuge. Many of them, it seems, did when the king of Assyria entered the land and besieged Samaria, where they lived miserably as an exile and were there buried, and never returned to their own land anymore. Or they should be carried captive into Assyria. Do you see that? Or they should be carried captive into Assyria, where they should be in a like state of bondage as their fathers were in Egypt. So, as we've demonstrated so far, the Christian commentators agree that the term Egypt can be used to explain a state of bondage as bad as, or even worse than, the bondage our forefathers experienced in actual Egypt. Now, let's look at what happened. Okay, so the kingdom of Israel was destroyed. All right. And I'm pulling up some information here so that I can speak according to knowledge. All right. So we're looking at the northern kingdom was destroyed approximately 721 BC. Okay. You're looking at the Assyrian captivity on the left. It says the Assyrian captivity is the period of history of ancient Israel and Judah, during which several thousand Israelites from the northern kingdom of Israel, were forcibly relocated to the Neo-Assyrian Empire, right? They destroyed the capital, they burned the cities, they displaced the people, all right? This is a historical fact and can be backed up with archaeology. And we're not gonna go into that here, but I wanted to show you something very heavy, right? And you can read that story in 2 Kings chapter 17, 5 through 6. You can read another iteration of it in 2 Kings 18, 10 through 11, 1 Chronicles 5 and 26, all right? And some prophecies about it in Amos 5 and 27, all right? So this is when the northern kingdom was destroyed. Now, remember, when we read Hosea, Hosea was a prophecy about the northern kingdom going into Egypt. Let's see where the northern kingdom actually was carried to. And we just read it. It was carried into Assyria, which is the opposite direction from Egypt. All right. And it's a whole nother empire. It says, although this is not the land of Egypt, it can be counted as Egypt because this is where the children of Israel were carried captive. That's important to note because, as the Christian commentators pointed out, when they agree with us and they agree with the scriptures, the term Egypt can be used for bondage. It is synonymous with the term bondage, and we're going to get the precepts for that. All right. Now here, there is no biblical record of the northern kingdom physically going into Egypt. When I say there's no biblical record, there is no biblical record of us being carried away into Egypt, okay, as a whole, right? The text says that the king of Assyria carried us away captives. All right. Let me see. I think I have a precept here that I want to pull. If this isn't it, then I'm going to leave it alone if this isn't it. Okay, Salaki, this isn't it. So I'm gonna keep rolling. All right. I'm gonna keep rolling. So let's take a look. This is 2 Kings 17:5. Then the king of Assyria came up throughout all the land and went up to Samaria and besieged it 3 years. In the 9th year of Hosea, the king of Assyria took Samaria and carried Israel away into Assyria and placed them in Halah and in Habor by the river of Gozan and in the city of the Medes. So this brings forth what we were reading in Hosea earlier, that Israel should go into Egypt, right? Because remember, we're proving what Mitzraim means. And Mitzraim means bondage. And when the king of Assyria came and took us and put our northern kingdom brothers and sisters in captivity, he effectively took them into Egypt. Okay, you see that? Now, let's read some of the precepts that are associated with this, right? And I'm gonna fly through them, but we got to pull out some of the classics because this is why this term is used over and over throughout the Bible. Exodus 20:2, I am the Lord thy God, which have brought thee out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Deuteronomy 5:6, I am the Lord thy God, which brought thee out of the land of Egypt from the house of bondage. Exodus 13:3. And Moses said to the people, remember this day in which ye came out from Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Deuteronomy 7:8. But because the Lord loved you, and because he would keep the oath which he had sworn unto your fathers, hath the Lord brought you out with a mighty hand and redeemed you out of the house of bondmen, from the hand of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Deuteronomy 13:10. And thou shalt stone him with stones that he die, because he hath sought to thrust thee away from the Lord thy God, which brought thee out of the land of Egypt from the house of bondage. So as we see here, okay, and I think it's pretty clear at this point that not only do we teach that the term Israel or Mitzrayim, as it is rendered in the Hebrew text, okay, the term Egypt just means bondage. The term Egypt just means to carry somebody away into captivity. It's not necessarily married to the geographical location of Egypt. All right. Hey, I appreciate y'all for watching. Okay. For more videos like this, make sure you join all the Sons of Thunder Israelite pages. We have the main page. We have the North Carolina page, the San Francisco page. All right. And any of the splinter pages that you might find. Like, share, and subscribe, and join us on all social media platforms. We love you, and shalom.